Hi, and welcome back. I am going to read part 2 of McBroom's wonderful One Acre Farm today by Sid Fleischmann, or Fleischmann, still not sure about the pronunciation. But I just wanted to say hi first. I am glad that you're watching this. I hope that you enjoy it. Again, this is one of my favorite books from when I was little. When I was little growing up, I read hundreds and hundreds of books. I think that was my favorite place to be. I was homeschooled, and many times hidden inside my textbook, this is obviously a textbook, but inside my textbook, I would be hiding a book, reading it for fun. And sometimes I got caught, and sometimes I didn't. I know that for many children, there are all kinds of disciplinary measures to help children become self-controlled and everything. And for me, growing up, most of the time that involved taking away my books. Anyway, this is a book that I just find it so funny, so clever. I hope you enjoy. You can see a painting back there for fun. Painting of my mom's up on the fridge. Back there, over there, dirty dishes. That's real life. Also, I appreciate doing this because it encourages me to put makeup on, put jewelry on, have a little bit of fun with that. Okay, that took a while. Part 2 of McBroom's wonderful One Acre Farm, McBroom and the Big Wind. Again, I'm reading it on my phone because I don't have the paperback, unfortunately. Not yet. I can't deny it. It does get a mite windy out here on the prairie. Why, just last year a blow came ripping across our farm and carried off a pail of sweet milk. The next day it came back for the cow. But that wasn't the howling, scowling, almighty big wind I'm about to tell you about. That was just a common little prairie breeze. No account, really. Hardly worth bragging about. It was the big wind that broke my leg. I don't expect you to believe that yet. I'd best start with some smaller weather and work up to that bone breaker. I remember distinctly the first prairie wind that came scampering along after we bought our wonderful 1 acre farm. My, that land is rich. Best topsoil in the country. There is nothing that won't grow in our rich topsoil, and fast as lightning. The morning I'm talking about, our oldest boys were helping me to shingle the roof. I had brought a bag of nails, but it turned out those nails were a whit short. We buried them in our wonderful topsoil and watered them down. In 5 or 10 minutes, those nails grew a ½ inch. So there we were up on the roof, hammering down shingles. There wasn't a cloud in the sky at first. The younger boys were shooting marbles all over the farm, and the girls were jumping rope. When I had pounded down that last shingle, I said to myself, Josh McBroom, that's a mighty stout roof. It'll last 100 years. Just then, I felt a small draft on the back of my neck. A moment later, one of the girls, it was Polly, as I recall, shouted up to me. Pa, she said, do jackrabbits have wings? I laughed. No, Polly. Then how come there's a flock of jackrabbits flying over the house? I looked up. Mercy! Rabbits were flapping their ears across the sky in a perfect V formation, northbound. I knew then we were in for a slight blow. Run, everybody! I shouted to the young'uns. I didn't want the wind picking them up by the ears. Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Peter, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda. In the house! Scamper! The clothesline was already beginning to whip around like a jump rope. My dear wife Melissa, who had been baking a heap of biscuits, threw open the door. In we dashed, and not a moment too soon. The wind was snapping at our heels like a pack of wolves. It aimed to barge right in and make itself at home. A prairie wind has no manners at all. We slammed the door in its teeth. Now the wind didn't take that politely. It rammed and it battered at the door while all of us pushed and shoved to hold that door shut. My, it was a battle. How the house creaked and trembled. Push, my lambs, I yelled. Shove! At times the door planks bent like barrel staves, but we held that roaring wind out. When it saw that there was no getting past us, that zephyr sneaked around the house to the back door. However, our oldest boy, Will, was too smart for it. He piled Mamma's heap of fresh biscuits against the back door. My dear wife Melissa is a wonderful cook, but her biscuits are terribly heavy. They made a splendid doorstop. But what worried me most was our wondrous rich topsoil. That thieving wind was apt to make off with it, leaving us with a trifling hole in the ground. "Shove, my lambs!" I yelled. "Push!" The battle raged on for an hour. Finally the wind gave up, butting its full head against the door. With a great angry sigh it turned and whisked itself away, scattering fence pickets as it went. We all took a deep breath, and I opened the door a crack. Hardly a leaf now stood on the ground. A bird began to twitter. I rushed outside to see our poor 1-acre farm. Mercy, what I saw left me pop-eyed. "Melissa," I shouted with glee. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda come here, my lambs, and look!" We all gazed in wonder. Our topsoil was there, every bit. Bless those youngsters! The boys had left their marbles all over the yard, and the marbles had grown to be as big as boulders. There they sat, huge agates and sparkling glassies, holding down our precious topsoil. But that rambunctious wind did not leave empty-handed. It ripped up our new shingle roof, pulled out the nails too. We found out later the wind had shingled every gopher hole in the next county. Now that was a strong draft, but it wasn't the big wind. Nothing like the kind that broke my leg. Still, that prairie gust was an education for me. "Young'uns," I said, after we'd rolled those giant marbles down the hill, "the next uninvited breeze that comes along, we'll be ready for it. There are two sides to every flapjack. It appears to me the wind can be downright useful on our farm if we let it know who's boss." The next gusty day that came along, we put it to work for us. I made the wind plow. I rigged a bed sheet and tackle to our old farm plow. Soon as a breeze sprang up, I'd go tacking to and fro over the farm, plowing as I went. Our son Chester once plowed the entire farm in under 3 minutes. On Thanksgiving morning, Mama told the girls to pluck a large turkey for dinner. They didn't much like that chore, but a prairie gust arrived just in time. The girls stuck the turkey out the window. The wind plucked that turkey clean, pin feathers and all. Oh, we got downright glad to see a blow come along. The young'uns were always wanting to go out and play in the wind, but Mama was afraid they'd be carried off, so I made them wind shoes, made them out of heavy iron skillets. Out in the breeze, those shoes felt light as feathers. The girls could jump rope with a clothesline. The wind spun the rope, of course. Many a time I saw the youngsters put on their wind shoes and go clumping outside with a big tin funnel and all the empty bottles and jugs they could round up. They'd cork the containers jam full of prairie wind. Then come summer, when there wasn't a breath of air, they'd uncork a bottle or two of fresh winter wind and enjoy a cool breeze. Of course, we had to windproof the farm every fall. We'd plant the field in buttercups. My, they were slippery. All that butter, I guess. The wind would slip and slide over the farm without being able to get a purchase on the topsoil. By then, the boys and I had reshingled the roof. We used screws instead of nails. Mercy, then came the big wind. It started out gently enough. There were a few jackrabbits and some crows flying backward through the air, nothing out of the ordinary. Of course, the girls were ready the girls went outside to jump the clothesline, and the boys got busy laying up bottles of wind for summer. Mama had just baked a batch of fresh biscuits. My, did they smell good. I ate a dozen or so, but just hot out of the oven, and that turned out to be a terrible mistake. Outside, the wind was picking up ground speed and scattering fence posts as it went. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda," I shouted. "Inside, my lambs, that wind is getting ornery." The young'uns came trooping in and pulled off their wind shoes, and not a moment too soon. The clothesline began to whip around so fast it seemed to disappear. Then we saw a hen house come flying through the air with the hen's sill in it. The sky was turning dark and mean. The wind came out of the far north, howling and shrieking and shaking the house. In the cupboard, cups clattered in their saucers. Soon we noticed big balls of fur rolling along the prairie like tumbleweeds. Turned out they were timber wolves from up north. And then an old hollow log came spinning across the farm and split against my chopping stump. Out rolled a black bear, and was he in a temper. He had been trying to hibernate and didn't take too kindly to being awakened. He gave out a roar and looked around for somebody to chase. He saw us at the window and decided we would do. The mere sight of him scared the young uns, and they huddled together holding hands near the fireplace. I got out my shotgun and opened a window. That was a mistake. Two things happened at once. The bear was coming in, and in my haste I forgot to calculate the direction of the wind. It came shrieking along the side of the house, and when I poked the gun barrel out the window, well, that wind bent it like an angle iron. That buckshot flew due south. I found out later it brought down a brace of ducks over Mexico. But worse than that, when I threw open the window, such a draft came in that our young uns were sucked up through the chimney. Holding hands, they were carried away like a string of sausages. Mamma near fainted away. "My dear Melissa," I exclaimed, "don't you worry, I'll get our young uns back." I fetched a rope and rushed outside. I could see the young uns up in the sky and blowing south. I could also see the bear, and he could see me. He gave a growl with a mouthful of teeth like rusty nails. He rose up on his hind legs and came toward me with his eyes glowing red as fire. I didn't fancy tangling that monster. I dodged around behind the clothesline. I kept one eye on the bear and the other on the young uns. They were now flying over the county seat and looked hardly bigger than mayflies. The bear charged at me. The wind was spinning the clothesline so fast he couldn't see it, and he charged smack right into it. My, didn't he begin to jump. He jumped red hot pepper, only faster. He had got himself trapped inside the rope and couldn't jump out. Of course, I didn't lose a minute. I began flapping my arms like a bird. That was such an enormous big wind I figured I could fly up after the young uns. The wind tugged and pulled at me, but it couldn't lift me an inch off the ground. Tarnation, I had eaten too many biscuits. They were as heavy as lead, and they weighed me down. The young uns were almost out of sight. I rushed to the barn for the wind to plow. Once out in the breeze, the bedsheet filled with wind. Off I shot like a cannonball, plowing a deep furrow as I went. Didn't I streak along, though? I was making better time than the young uns. I kept my hands on the plow handles and steered around barns and farmhouses. I saw haystacks explode in the wind. If that wind got any stronger, it wouldn't surprise me to see the sun blown off course. It would set in the south at high noon. I plowed right along and gained rapidly on the young uns. They were still holding hands and just clearing the treetops. Before long, I was within hailing distance. "Be brave, my lambs!" I shouted. "Hold tight!" I sprinted after them until their shadows lay across my path, but the bedsheet was so swelled out with the wind that I couldn't stop the plow. Before I could let go of the handle and jump off, I had sailed far ahead of the young uns. I heaved the rope into the air. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda," I shouted as they came flying overhead. "Hang on!" Hester missed the rope, and Jill missed the rope, and so did Peter. But Will caught it. I had to dig in my heels into the earth to hold them, and then I started back. The young uns were too light for the wind. They hung in the air. I had to drag them home on the rope like balloons on a string. Of course, it took us most of the day to shoulder my way back through the wind. It was a mighty struggle, I tell you. It was near supper time when we saw our farmhouse up ahead, and that black bear was still jumping rope. I dragged the young uns into the house. The rascals, they had a jolly time flying through the air and wanted to do it again. Mamma put them to bed with their wind shoes on. The wind blew all night, and the next morning that bear was still jumping rope. His tongue was hanging out, and he had lost so much weight he was skin and bones. Finally, after mid-morning, the wind got tired of blowing one way, so it blew the other. We got to feeling sorry for that bear and cut him loose. He was so tuckered out he didn't even growl. He just pointed himself toward the tall timber to find another hollow log to crawl into. But he had lost the fine art of walking. We saw him jump, 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 jump north until he was out of sight. There was a howling, scowling, almighty big wind that broke my leg. It had not only pulled up fence posts, but holes as well. It dropped one of those holes right outside the barn door, and I stepped into it. That's the bottom truth. Everyone on the prairie knows Josh McBroom would rather break his leg than tell a fib. that was part 2 of McBroom's wonderful 1 Acre Farm. I hope you enjoyed that. I did. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye.